Right, 12:15. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's public session of the Oversight and Engagement Board for the 6th of August. We'll get straight into the agenda. This is obviously being live streamed as we speak. So we'll go to item 8, which is minutes from the previous meeting held on the 30th of July in public session. I will assume, unless anyone's got any burning questions, that is agreed and those are accepted. Thank you, everyone. So we get straight into the meat of the meeting, which is number 9, summary of local surveillance data. And it's over to you, Lucy Whiteman, who's the Director of Public Health, as if people didn't know that already. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. So people will see from the most recent public release of the data that we've obviously taken a number of steps. People are aware that Northampton was already on the national watch list, but we've been taking proactive steps and have obviously increased our level of communication and engagement in Corby, and we continue to watch Kettering with close interest and utilise a lot of the messaging, etc., that we've been using elsewhere in Kettering. And also we are now making sure that we're engaging heavily in Wellingborough, where we've also seen an increase in cases. So this last week's report reflects data up to the 26th of July. So we can go through that, but I can also provide a little bit of a situational update from the last few days. So our slide number 2 obviously gives a summary of the position that we're in. Even then, actually, you can see that we've been closely monitoring rates in Wellingborough for some time. We know that obviously we have a fluctuation in case rates and the rate of testing on a day-to-day basis. So we're looking for sustained trends, both in the wrong way in order for us to take action, but also in relation to our response locally in Northampton and Corby and Kettering in a positive direction. So we're making sure that obviously on a day-to-day basis we're monitoring where those trends are going. We continue obviously to make sure that people understand the key messages. So we've been urging people in Northampton and Corby to make sure that they adhere to additional behavioural measures to avoid local lockdown measures. We've obviously seen those more recently being implemented up north and also in Scotland. So some of the steps that we've taken obviously to reinforce the messages around social distancing, around hand washing, around, if you can, working from home wherever possible, etc. But some of the things we've specifically done in Northamptonshire, where we've identified particular groups of people who are affected, is ask, for example, things like multi-team sporting gatherings and tournaments, which were due to start last weekend, not to go ahead. That's because we've seen that increase in our 20 to 30-year-olds who are likely to be parents of young children who would be engaging in such sporting activity. And we also know that those more voluntary run sporting gatherings tend to be in areas where it's less easy and less accessible to wash your hands and maintain hand hygiene, where because of queuing for food and drink vending, supplies, etc., social distancing is less likely to be maintained. So you can understand why we're asking for those measures to be put in place. We've also seen some care homes restricting their visiting times, which I can appreciate is disappointing for some, with steps only just starting to be taken to reopen visiting at care homes. In those high-risk areas, we've obviously made sure that those restrictions stay in place. That obviously is because we need to make sure that our most vulnerable residents continue to be protected. And we're also reminding people last week coming up to Eid to make sure that they enjoy Eid safely. It's a really exciting time, but we want to make sure that people still do remember that gatherings where families are coming together to celebrate, maybe exchanging food and gifts, etc., that it's easy to forget some of those social distancing and hand washing, hand hygiene messages. So again, just reinforcing some of those messages with our faith communities. So on slide 6, you will see that we've given you a total and a weekly summary for our tests, and in the week up to the 20th to the 26th of July, 82 cases were identified in Northamptonshire. So that brings the total at that point to 3,473 cases for the county. Most of those were identified through Pillar 2 testing, so that's testing in the wider community. Obviously, people will be aware of the fact that we've increased testing, and I will bring in Sharon, who's our local testing lead, to give us some information about that. So Pillar 1 testing obviously is the testing that's done in our acute settings, and we still continue to find positives through that route. be they individuals who are inpatients or be it staff in high-risk areas. Obviously, we continue to make sure that those settings are safe and those people are identified as early as possible. On the next page, you can see there's a breakdown of cases by age and by gender, and this is really important, and this has been helping shape our actions and our communications, as I mentioned previously. So the left-hand pyramid, as previous reports, shows the overall Pillar 1 test positive breakdown for age and for gender. And as I said, those are the people who either are working in an acute setting in a high-risk area or who have been admitted as an inpatient. So unsurprisingly, that gender and age profile reflects those that are likely to have been more severely impacted by COVID and also have likely to have been admitted. Whereas on the right-hand side, you've got the population pyramid for the Pillar 2 cases. So this much more reflects the general population. Again, you can see there's a significant increase in our younger population as compared to Pillar 1. It is primarily the working age population, and the increase in women over 80 is likely to be those that are living independently in the community. Females tend to live longer than males, and therefore that's reflected again in that population pyramid. So getting into the meat of the current reporting in cases, you can see that on slide 8, it gives us a breakdown of those cases by area. So you can see Northampton continues to be, from a crude count of cases, the most affected area. And that's unsurprising because it's our most highly populated area. That's obviously closely followed by East Northamptonshire, which is large and rural. And then you can see the numbers in Kettering. Sorry, I should say Kettering first, and Corby as well. You can see the change from the previous week is that those cases are going down in most areas other than South Northamptonshire. South Northamptonshire, that was only 3 cases, so we are still talking about small numbers in those areas. Obviously, if we continue to see an increase in somewhere like Northampton, where it's 49 cases, we wouldn't be looking at the trend going in the right direction there. You can still see, as I said, the breakdown as well of where those cases are being identified through Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 testing. Pillar 1, obviously, those cumulative number of cases is likely much more earlier to have reflected those that were hospitalised. We're likely to see a significant increase in the Pillar 2 reporting because we're now testing that wider community. On the following slide, on slide 9, it gives us the rate per 100,000 population. So that makes comparison between areas possible, because what we've done is artificially made each of the population sizes the same in each area. So you can see there that Kettering continues to have the highest rate, followed by Northampton and then by Corby. Those are obviously changing on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. Most of them are now similar or slightly lower to the county rate. We still obviously have Kettering and Northampton where it's significantly higher. And again, a similar pattern for those compared to the national rate. We haven't included the regional rate at the moment because at the moment Leicester City has obviously skewed our regional rate and made it look a lot higher because there were so many cases in that area. So we found that it's a much more accurate comparison to the national rate, and it would be the national rate that we'd obviously look to be following, as opposed to the regional rate, which was artificially increased with the testing regime in Leicester City. I think this is really easy to see, and also you can see the variation day on day on slide 11. So that gives you a graphical representation of that rate through our lab confirmed cases. So the fine dotted grey line is the England case rate per 100,000 population, and that sits, as you can see, just above 1 case per 100,000 population. The Northamptonshire rate is obviously higher than that and has been increasing steadily over time, as we've talked about for the last few weeks. But you can quite easily see how the higher rates are visible in Kettering, Corby and Northampton. So again, it's one of those things that is able to make that comparison easier and see the journey we've been on, where we've had those steadily increasing cases across the county, but you can see the particular areas that have driven that increase. And then also you can start to see some of those numbers come down. Obviously, just a quick reminder, this data goes up to the 24th, in this case on this graph. A lot of the additional testing that we've undertaken, which we'll come to with the situational update in a second, really has seen those trends change again over the last few days, which will be reflected in next week's report. So slides 12 onwards give you a breakdown of where those areas of focus are in relation to both the cumulative cases, so the cases since the beginning of the pandemic on slide 12, and then again that rate of comparison on slide 13. So those hotspots, as we expected, are still focused in the north of the county, out to the east in parts, and certainly on Northampton still. Some of this will be driven by some of our outbreaks that we're aware of. Some of this will be circulating virus within the community still. In the last 28 days, which obviously starts to take out that really big cohort of older multi-morbid population from the beginning of the pandemic. So the last 28 days, slides 14 and 15, reflect the current position. You can see that we're still focused very much on Northampton town, with some more cases to the north and to the east. Again, in the last 28 days, those rates make that comparison easier. And this is helping us drive where we're targeting our communications and intervention and engagement with our population. So a quick summary on page 16, and obviously some links for people on page 17. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm just looking around to see if there are any questions. It doesn't appear that there are. Just to say that the work that's carrying on is very impressive, and we've all been impressed with the level of service we're getting from our teams on all fronts. I think there are no questions. Therefore, if we move on to item 10, the situation update, and back to you, Lucy, again. Thank you, Lucy.
So to give a brief update on the overall situation, then we can obviously move on to testing and communications for all of those areas. So if I just give the high level summary, obviously Northampton continues to be an area of concern and continues to be on the national watch list. We've been working with our partners at Public Health England, through the Department for Health and Social Care, through our regional convener, Dr. Peter Marks, and a number of other agencies to help us make sure that we've got access to all of the data that we need to understand what's driving the challenge in Northampton and to respond accordingly. All of the soft intelligence has been that there's been a reasonable level of compliance with not only national guidelines, but obviously some of the restrictions that we've requested locally. However, we urge our business communities, our pubs, our restaurants, etc., particularly with some of the initiatives around eating out at the moment, that they continue to make sure that they allow people and enable people to maintain social distancing, that they, people are still conscientious when they go out and they take responsibility for doing so themselves. And that obviously we make sure that, for example, where people are staying for drinks and for food, that they're providing contact details at those settings, so that if there are any outbreaks associated with those settings, it's a lot easier to warn and inform people and make sure that they take appropriate action. We've seen in a number of other places in this country and in Scotland now, where pubs and restaurants have been associated with outbreaks, and so that's increasingly a message that we want to make sure that we get through, not just in Northampton, but across the county. In Kettering, obviously, communications and engagements continued as well with the public and also with business partners, to make sure that they understand the restrictions that are in place and how to access local testing, which we've been ramping up significantly across the whole of the county. Similarly, in Corby, they took the very sensible move to delay the opening of the Cube, where they recognise that's a community hub. It does send a strong message about the seriousness of the interventions at the moment, and the fact that Corby's numbers have been going in the wrong direction, with the additional testing and also the additional messaging and the support work that's gone out through EHOs to businesses, etc. We're starting to see that trend change, but we need to make sure that that's maintained and sustained. So again, that messaging needs to remain strong, and people again need to maintain all of the best practice that we've been seeing in the last few days. And I'll come on to Wellingborough. So that has been alerting now for a few days. So we have now taken a decision to step up communications and engagement in Wellingborough too. There is a calculation undertaken by Public Health England that provides a number of expected cases to be seen in any area, and Wellingborough has been exceeding that now for the last couple of days. So again, based on the effectiveness of the communications and engagement and the brilliant response that we've had from the public in Kettering, Wellingborough, Northampton and Corby, we want to make sure that we also take those same steps in Wellingborough to make sure we remain ahead of the curve and that COVID doesn't get a grip in that community too. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions, but I know that our comms and our testing leads will be able to give more detailed updates on their areas too.
Thank you, Lucy. Very thorough report as always. I'm looking around. There don't appear to be any questions. So if we go on to Sharon Wright and testing venue updates and as many figures and facts as you can give us would gratefully received. Thank you, Sharon. Over to you.
Good afternoon. So our testing capacity is increasing across our county. We have mobilised local testing sites into the town centres of Northampton, Kettering and Corby. A local testing site is something that's a semi-permanent site, and it will be there for anywhere between 4 and 12 weeks. So, and we will, as time goes through, we'll consider whether it needs to be moved somewhere else and whether we've reached our capacity there. The Northampton site came live on the 31st of July, and to date we've done 1,281 tests through that site. And yesterday we did 243. We're having a steady throughput of around about 200 to 250 through the Northampton's site there. For Kettering, that's on London Road car park, just slightly off the town centre, but certainly very accessible from the town centre. And that came live on the 1st of August, and they've to date done 858. And yesterday they did 175. So again, a very steady throughput of around about 150 to 170 a day. And in Corby, they came live on the 3rd of August, and to date they've done 637. Of yesterday did 220. So again, a steady throughput going through those sites, and that sort of fits with what we've been doing with our mobile testing units, where we've seen round about 150 to 200 going through there since we've been running those over the last few months. So the mobile testing units supplement the local testing sites, and they're rotated around the county. And they're moved around so make sure that through Northamptonshire there is access for most areas to be able to get access to COVID-19 testing. What we're able to do is move those around quite quickly. They come into your area for about 3 days. But where we're seeing exceedance, as Lucy explained earlier, we're able to swap them around and move them around quite quickly to be able to facilitate getting testing into that area. So we are moving a site into Wellingborough over this weekend, because I'm aware that we had to cancel a normal testing site in Wellingborough to deal with Northampton last week. So Wellingborough hasn't had any testing for a little while, which demonstrates the low testing rates that we've got there. So we'll be moving a Wellingborough a mobile testing unit into place over this weekend urgently by swapping things around. And then we'll be looking with the local teams there as to where we could possibly put a local testing site that is a walk-in, therefore in the same way we have put everywhere else, to capture those people that tend to congregate around town centres. It's close to mosques, temple, churches, bars, European shops, all of those places where we get that 18 to 30 age group sort of hanging around in town centres. So we can move to get things in place there. So we've got a steady state of MTUs. So we have got a forward plan, which we will be sharing, but obviously we have to move things in and out of different places depending on what the local situation is. So when we're looking at the data We have got some specific sites in the towns, but we're looking to fill our portfolio with other areas as well, so that we can really make sure that we've got we're putting the testing units in quite the right places to make sure that people don't have to travel too far to be tested. We're just going through the getting a regional testing site in Kettering to be able to have that facility, which is a longer term solution and will be there for many months. And that helps us because our regional testing sites that feed the MTUs and the local testing sites at the moment are sitting out at Milton Keynes, Leicester, Nottingham, Lincoln, which actually reduces the amount of time that our mobile testing units can work, because they've got to pick them up and drop them off there. So actually having that testing site local, sorry, postman, to have that regional testing site in place is really important for us for that longer term testing solution in county. So we're just in the process of project managing that at the moment, and we'd hope to get that up and running within the next 14 days.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm glad it's not always me that has a dog barking in the background, but that was a really good update. Thank you very much. I'm just looking around to see if there are, yes, we do have some questions. I've got Toby and then David. Toby, please, if you go first, then David. Thank you, Toby.
Thank you, Chair. A comment and then a question. The comment is it's really encouraging to see the uptake and increase in levels of testing activity as such a critical element of our response across the county. So kind of thank you and well done for all the teams who've been working so hard on that front. And particularly encouraging to see the progress on a regional testing site. I think that's going to be a really important bit of the jigsaw for us going through the next few months, and particularly as we head into the autumn and winter period as well. I know it's something a number of us have lobbied for very much from a local perspective, to have that facility on that regional basis. So really pleased that that's going to be coming through. The question, and it's perhaps a question more to Lucy perhaps than to Sharon, the testing element is one component of this. The tracing element, of course, is an equally critical part of our response in terms of being able to manage and mitigate risk of community transmission. I wonder, Lucy, if you could just tell us a little bit more with where we're up to locally on that, and any support that you might need to help us to take that work forward on the tracing side of things. Thank you, Ian.
Lucy, over to you. Or shall I bring David in first and then Lucy? Yes, David.
Yes, perhaps it does link in a sense, and as we're in a public meeting, I think it's I'm speaking from a Health Watch perspective, a public voice perspective. It's important to recognise that people have been shaken by some of the news over the last week or two. I know somebody close to where I live who's been shielding, who's very, very nervous about going shopping and going back to work. And particularly my grandchildren don't live around here, but they've been for testing because their parents are watching, and that's not an easy thing to do, but they've been twice, I think. People are uncertain and unaware, so it's good to know that there's some very positive things happening, and thank you to everybody for doing that. But the key message, I think, and perhaps this strays into the communication strategy, is that we need to be saying to people that testing is important, not for you, but for other people. It's your responsibility to your neighbours and your friends and people that you are close to and people you are concerned about. Often it's more important that you're tested to stop the spread rather than to say, well, do you need treatment? So that's one thing. And the second thing is, and that's appealing to people's public spirit, people's sense of community. And that isn't always easy in a world where people think about themselves first sometimes, but we've got to get that over. And the second thing is, people are likely to be more willing to do that if they feel they can trust the process, that the information they're giving is going to be used responsibly, is not going to be shared irresponsibly, is going to be used just for the purpose of this really important thing. I want to encourage people to do track and tracing, but if it's going to work, and it's going to work without enforcement, we've got to bring people with us. So perhaps in the communication strategy, We can talk about how we're going to encourage people that this information isn't going to be fed into some big database where people can't trust where it's going to be used. It is just for this purpose, and it's all of our responsibility to cooperate, because it's our responsibility to our families and our friends and our neighbours. And that isn't an easy message, but I think it's a message we've got to get over. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'll bring Lucy in a second. I think both Toby and David make very good points, particularly around the track and trace element. We have to get that right in the county in order to get control of the numbers and the infection rate. I'll bring Lucy in, but obviously we're all here working to help her achieve what she needs to achieve in the local area. So Lucy, over to you.
Thank you. So if I take these in slight reverse order, if that's okay. So David, absolutely take on board what you're saying with regard to protecting others, and our comms campaigns do have the information about, you know, we recognise that quite often at the moment that the cohort that are testing positive won't have symptoms or won't have serious symptoms if have symptoms at all. But this is about making sure that they take appropriate action and they stop the onward transmission, because that's going to be key. And obviously key to that, as you quite rightly say, is the contact tracing process. Yes, we absolutely would only be using at a national level and also at a local level data for the purposes of identifying people who either are cases themselves to help us understand where they may have contracted the virus, or to help us identify people that they may have been in contact with and who therefore are also at risk. It will not and does not, with the national system, get used for anything else. So I can provide that assurance and talk about what we'd like to do, because we want to be able to bring that service locally as well. So in more response to Toby's question, we've been working with the national team for Test and Trace around how we deliver a local contact tracing service. I'm very conscious, and people will have seen that the national statistics, that the contact tracing process success rate varies across regions, and our region isn't one that has the highest rate by any means. It's an area of significant concern, I know, to myself, but also to wider health and care partners, that we're losing the opportunity to identify those people who may have been at risk by being in contact, and by being able to give them the information and the support that they need to self-isolate for 14 days, because that is the requirement at the moment for us to make sure that we obviously, as I said, stop that onward transmission in the community. At the moment, the levels of follow-up on test and trace mean that we've still got a significant proportion of our population who continue to be at risk. So those national conversations are about how we can facilitate a localised test and trace service. So what we'd be doing is getting that test information through national routes, but we would have a team that locally worked with our EHOs and with our community leaders who know all of the areas affected by this best, to help us make sure that we identify and reach out to the people who may have been put at risk and provide them with the information and support that they would need to self-isolate as appropriate. And that would include a variety of different approaches. At the moment, the national programme is simply phone calls. What we'd be looking to do is make sure that we actually reach into the communities and work best with that community to ensure that we achieve a high success rate. So that may be about visiting people if that's how they would prefer to be contacted, but making sure again that there's a range of different sources of information in different languages that are culturally sensitive to help people understand the role that they need to play in stopping that onward transmission. At the moment, there are some challenges around information and data governance, so we're overcoming those with the national team, but we have a plan in place to be able to mobilise that service locally as and when we are able to implement it, and we can overcome some of these IT and technical barriers. In other areas, it's been extraordinarily successful. Leicester City, a really good example of setting up that local contact tracing service early and being able to follow up a significant number of those cases that were otherwise lost through the national system. So absolutely a priority over the next week or so for us to identify how we can do that here.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Lucy. And obviously speed is of the essence with any of these things, because if it comes into being too late, it'll be too late. So we're definitely all behind you on that one. David, did you want to come back in?
No, I thank you very much, Lucy, for the response, and I fully accept and understand that. But this is a unprecedented sense of cooperation we're asking the public to do, and it's a major issue in a very difficult context. So we've got to just keep working at it. But anything HealthWatch can do to help, we're very happy to do that. It's really important that people do cooperate with the system, and we just need to keep their assurance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jonathan, I believe you wanted to come in as well. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Ian. I'll be brief because I've got a dreadful internet connection, but I think David is absolutely right. This won't work through enforcement. There is no enforcement, and nor will it work by pubs asking people and insisting, because they won't want that tension. It will only work when people go into a pub and demand that they give their details. In other words, people need to feel a sense of cooperation. And the message that we need to put out, we'll switch our comms at Northampton to this, is unless you go to somewhere safe where they are recording details, you are putting other members of your family at risk. That's how we've got to turn that message, so that people say to a pub where they walk in, are you taking details? If the answer is no, they go somewhere else.
Couldn't agree more with you there, Jonathan. Lucy, did you want to come back on that? Or I think that's probably a statement we would all agree with.
Absolutely, and I'm more than happy to take that through our comms routes. You're absolutely right. People need to recognise that actually businesses should be trying to do this and make sure that their patrons are safe, and therefore in turn they're able to, as you say, make sure that their families and their co-workers, etc., are safe. So I think it's really important that we do make sure that that messaging strikes home. So I think we'll talk about how we can take that approach.
Perfect, thank you, and we'll bring that back, the track and trace and the approach to the businesses as well, to the next meeting. I would think would be an action point that I would like to see come back, so that we can see where we've got to with those elements, if that's okay with you, Lucy. In which case, it sort of leads nicely into the comms and engagement update. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, all loud and clear. Thank
Great.
you.
Okay, so I'll give you, I'll go over the weekly updates, just so that you're all informed what we're doing as a team. So we're sending regular media releases and social media posts with data updates, details of mobile testing unit sites, and behavioural prompts for the residents of Northampton, Corby, Kettering, Wellingborough, and indeed across the county. Over the last 24 hours, Lucy Whiteman, Director of Public Health, has given an interview to BBC Radio Northampton about local infection rates. We've committed to a month-long county-wide advertising campaign, which involves radio adverts, targeted digital advertising, bus adverts, bus shelters, phone boxes, basically anywhere across the county where you can place a physical poster in existing slots will be there. The bus advertising will be seen across the county starting on Monday. Messaging will appear along the sides, the rear and the inside of the buses. The call to action is to get tested if you have symptoms or are concerned. Public Health Northamptonshire business pack was sent out yesterday to businesses across the county. This included small to medium-sized businesses to the much larger players such as Weetabix. This included a letter from the Director of Public Health with links to COVID secure and health and safety advice for the workplace. It also included 3 posters which we asked businesses to put up across their premises if at all possible. The posters were addressing 3 separate issues which had come to our attention. One was to remind employees to continue to be COVID secure when having a cigarette on their break. One was designed to address issues of car sharing, entitled Take Care When You Car Share. And the third was designed to remind people to continue to practice COVID secure behaviours in the community. That was entitled Don't Leave COVID Secure at the Door. They had basic messages around behavioural prompts with quite nice designs as well, which were put together by the comms team. We're continuing to publish the weekly surveillance data reports. The next one will be tomorrow. And again, there'll be another press conference tomorrow via Zoom. There's also a piece of work in hand which is involving making the testing centres across the county a little less daunting and a little less austere. And we've put a call out for design work, volunteers really, to come forward to make them look a little more attractive And also I know that in Corby in particular, school children have come forward with lots of pictures which are going to be laminated and displayed on the side of the centre. I think that's everything for now, unless there are any questions.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. I mean, I have to say that the work that you and the comms team are doing is very admirable, and it is a very fast-moving river, as it were, and you are reacting to the situation. Sorry, Sarah, did you want to say something else?
No, I was agreeing that it's a fast-moving river. Yeah, we're doing everything we can to be as reactive as we can, as soon as we can. But please come forward with requests if you can notice any gaps, because that's what we're here for.
No, quite, and it's very important that everyone feeds into that information gap, as it were. So, Lucy, I just wanted to thank you for all your hard work as well. I mean, you've been under an incredible amount of pressure lately, so I think you're really doing an amazing job. So, and your interview the other day was very, very good.
It's the people that I'm surrounded by that make the job so much easier. As I said, we've talked about comms, and they've gone to extraordinary lengths to work not just reactively, but to keep those proactive messages going out as well. Sharon just moves mountains when it comes to getting testing locations sorted, and the wider public health team, and that includes obviously everybody at the borough and district from a community safety, licensing, environmental health perspective. It's an extraordinarily large and willing team, and we couldn't do any of what we're doing at the moment if we weren't doing it together. So we've just got to remember though that although we're starting to see good results, testing going up, etc., that we've got to sustain and maintain this. Wellingborough and the exceedance there is still a harsh warning that this hasn't gone away, and we've got to make sure that these are sustained new behaviours.
Yes, and I would agree with you. That is the key message to come out of any of this, is that the work is progressing, but we're not there yet. So we have to keep up the good work. I don't see any questions. I'm just looking around from anyone else, in which case if we could go on to any other business. I don't believe there is any, unless anyone's got any specifically. No. In which case our next meeting is on the 13th of August at 9 a.m. The next one after that is on the 20th of August at 9 a.m. And then there's another one on the 27th of August at 9 a.m. I'd like very much to thank everyone who's participated in this meeting today, and Cheryl for making it happen from the democratic support side, and of course to Lucy, Sharon, and everyone else and Sarah that have participated in this meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe, stay well, and keep spreading that message. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ian?
Yes.
Ian, that's our 3